The words landed harder than my father probably intended. Freeloader. He said it with a laugh, raising his glass as though he had just delivered the funniest joke of the evening. Everyone around the dinner table laughed with him. My mother. My older brother Daniel. His wife, Rachel. Even my little sister, Emily, gave an uncomfortable smile before looking down at her plate. I smiled too. Not because I thought it was funny. Because I had learned a long time ago that when your own family has decided to misunderstand you, defending yourself only gives them more ammunition. I slowly put my fork down. My father leaned back in his chair, looking pleased with himself. You're 29 years old, he continued. Still living in this house, still using our electricity, still eating our food. At some point, don't you think it's time to become an adult? My mother nodded. She needs some responsibility. Daniel laughed. Some? Everyone laughed again. I looked around the table. They had no idea. Not even the slightest idea. They didn't know where I had been spending my nights. They didn't know why I sometimes disappeared for entire weekends. They didn't know why I had stopped talking about work. And they definitely didn't know what was waiting for all of us the following morning. Because the company my father worked for was about to change ownership. And I was the reason. Chapter 1, The Girl They Thought Was Doing Nothing. My name is Claire Bennett. And for the past 18 months, my family believed I was unemployed. Technically, they weren't completely wrong. I didn't have a traditional job. I didn't wake up at 7 every morning, put on a suit, and drive to an office. I worked from home. At least, that's what they thought. The truth was much more complicated. 2 years earlier, I had left a promising corporate position at a technology company. I had been working in business strategy, helping companies identify inefficiencies and reduce operating costs. It wasn't glamorous work. But I was good at it. Very good. Then one afternoon, I noticed something. A transportation company I was consulting for was losing millions of dollars every year because of an outdated logistics system. I created a small software solution to fix the problem. At first, it was just a side project. Then another company wanted it. Then another. Within a year, I had 3 companies using my system. Then 7. Then 23. I created a company called Northstar Systems. I owned it completely. I had no fancy office. No company car. No assistants. Just a small team of programmers working remotely across different states. And because I was reinvesting almost everything back into the business, I didn't look rich. I still drove my old car. I still wore jeans and sweatshirts. And yes, I still lived in my parents' house. But there was a reason. I wasn't living there because I couldn't afford to leave. I was living there because my father had suffered a serious financial setback 3 years earlier, and my parents had asked me to stay. At the time, I had agreed. And once my company started growing, I quietly paid the mortgage. I covered the property taxes. I paid the utility bills. I even paid for my parents' medical insurance. They knew the payments came from an account I controlled. But they assumed I was just helping out. They had no idea how much I was actually contributing. I never told them. Why? Because every time I tried to explain what I was building, my father dismissed it. Internet nonsense. Another app. Get a real job. You need a paycheck. So eventually, I stopped explaining. And that silence became their evidence. My father, Robert Bennett, had worked for Harrington Industrial Solutions for 31 years. He started there as a junior technician. Over the decades, he worked his way into management. He was proud of that. Very proud. His boss was a man named Richard Harrington. Richard wasn't just the CEO. He was the founder's son. The company had been in the Harrington family for almost 50 years. My father respected him enormously. Sometimes too much. Every Sunday morning, my father would sit at the kitchen table reading business news about the company. He knew the quarterly numbers. He knew the major clients. He knew the executive team. And he frequently told us stories about Richard. Richard doesn't tolerate laziness. Richard respects people who work hard. Richard can recognize talent immediately. I found the irony almost amusing. Because Richard Harrington had been trying to meet me for almost 6 months. But my father had no idea. Neither did anyone else in my family. Harrington Industrial Solutions was one of the largest companies in the country providing industrial equipment and supply chain management services. And 6 months earlier, they had approached Northstar Systems. They wanted to buy our technology. At first, they offered $8 million. I rejected it. Then they offered $14 million. I rejected that too. Finally, after months of negotiations, we reached an agreement. The company wasn't simply buying our software. They were acquiring Northstar Systems. And because I was the majority owner, I would become one of the largest shareholders in Harrington Industrial Solutions. There was just one condition. The acquisition had to remain confidential until the official announcement. That meant I couldn't tell anyone. Not even my father. Especially not my father. The final paperwork was scheduled to be signed on a Monday morning. The exact same Monday after that dinner. I had no idea my father would insult me the night before. But perhaps that was what made what happened next even more unforgettable. The dinner started normally. My mother had cooked roast chicken. Daniel brought wine. Rachel talked about their upcoming vacation. Emily was complaining about college. I mostly listened. Then Daniel asked me a question. So, Claire, how's the job search? I looked up. It's going well. He smirked. Still searching? I'm working on something. What kind of something? I smiled. Business. He laughed. My father joined in. She doesn't have a job. I looked at him. Dad. No, seriously, he said. You've been working on something for almost 2 years. My mother sighed. Robert. He waved his hand. What? I'm just being honest. Daniel leaned forward. Come on, Claire. What do you actually do all day? I didn't answer immediately. Because I could have told them. I could have said. I run a technology company. We have 47 employees. Our software processes billions of dollars worth of logistics transactions. We're being acquired for tens of millions. And the CEO of the company you're also impressed by is waiting to meet me tomorrow. But I couldn't. The confidentiality agreement prevented me from saying anything. So I simply said, I work. My father laughed. Work. He looked at Daniel. Do you know what she does? Daniel shook his head. My father pointed at me. She sits upstairs with her laptop. Everyone laughed. She comes down whenever she's hungry. More laughter. Uses our Wi-Fi. My brother added. And probably our Netflix. Rachel laughed. My mother smiled weakly. Then my father said it. She's a freeloader. The room went quiet for half a second. Then everyone laughed again. I looked down at my plate. My hands were shaking. Not from anger. Disappointment. There is something uniquely painful about being insulted by strangers. But when your own father does it, it feels like something inside you quietly breaks. I looked at him. Do you really think I don't contribute anything to this family? He shrugged. I think you're wasting your life. I swallowed. Okay. He laughed. See? That's exactly what I mean. No ambition. I stood up. I think I'm finished. My mother looked concerned. Claire, sit down. No. I pushed my chair back. I'm tired. My father rolled his eyes. Of what? I looked at him. Being treated like I don't matter. Nobody spoke. I walked upstairs. Closed my bedroom door. And for the first time in 2 years, I cried. Not because they called me a freeloader. But because I had spent 2 years quietly making sure they were safe. And they didn't even know. At 11:43 that night, my phone rang. It was my attorney. Claire? Yes? Everything is finalized. I sat up. Everything? Yes. The acquisition closes tomorrow at 9 a.m. I looked toward the window. Outside, the neighborhood was completely quiet. What about the announcement? Scheduled for 10 o'clock. And Harrington's board? They've approved everything. I smiled. And Richard? He'll meet you at the headquarters at 8:30. I looked at the clock. Okay. There was a pause. Then my attorney asked. Are you all right? I laughed quietly. Actually. I looked at the bedroom door. I think tomorrow is going to be interesting. At 6:30 the next morning, I got dressed. Not in expensive clothes. Not in designer brands. I wore a simple black blazer, white blouse, and black trousers. I drove to Harrington headquarters in my old sedan. When I arrived, security already knew my name. The guard opened the gate. Good morning, Ms. Bennett. Good morning. I walked inside. The receptionist stood immediately. Ms. Bennett, Mr. Harrington is expecting you. I nodded. Thank you. I walked toward the executive conference room. Richard Harrington was already there. He was 62 years old. Tall. Silver-haired. Extremely serious. When he saw me, he stood up. But he didn't simply shake my hand. He walked toward me. Stopped. And gave me a formal salute. Good morning, ma'am. I smiled. Good morning, Richard. He lowered his hand. I still can't believe you built all of this from your bedroom. I laughed. Neither can my family. Richard smiled. After today, they'll know. I looked at the conference table. Is my father here? Richard nodded. He's downstairs. My heart stopped for a second. What? He's attending the management briefing this morning. I stared at Richard. You didn't tell him? Of course not. Richard smiled. I thought you'd prefer to. I took a breath. I think you're right. At exactly 8:55 a.m., the conference room doors opened. Several executives entered. Then my father walked in. He was holding a folder. He was talking to another manager. I stood at the far end of the room. My father didn't notice me at first. Then he looked up. His face changed. Claire? I smiled. Good morning, Dad. He stared at me. What are you doing here? Before I could answer, Richard Harrington walked toward me. He stopped beside my chair. Then he stood straight. And once again, he saluted. Good morning, ma'am. My father's mouth opened. He looked at Richard. Then at me. Then back at Richard. Richard. Richard smiled. Robert. My father looked confused. What's going on? Richard gestured toward me. I'd like to introduce you to our newest principal shareholder. Silence. Nobody moved. Richard continued. Claire Bennett, founder and CEO of North Star Systems. My father stared at me. I could see his face slowly losing color. Richard continued. Following today's acquisition, Ms. Bennett will be joining our board as Executive Strategy Director. One of the executives applauded. Then another. Then the entire room. My father didn't clap. He simply stood there. Frozen. Finally he whispered. North Star. I nodded. Yes. He looked at Richard. You bought North Star? Richard nodded. Correct. My father looked back at me. You. I smiled. Yes, Dad. He swallowed. You own that company? I did. Richard corrected him. She still does. My father looked completely stunned. But. He couldn't finish the sentence. I helped him. You thought I sat in my room all day. He lowered his eyes. I continued. You thought I was unemployed. He said nothing. You thought I was a freeloader. His face tightened. I didn't know. I know. The room was completely silent. Then Richard said something I'll never forget. Robert, your daughter is responsible for one of the most significant technology acquisitions this company has ever made. My father looked at him. Richard continued. And frankly, I hope you realize how lucky you are to have someone like her in your family. My father's eyes filled with tears. He looked at me. I owe you an apology. I nodded. Yes. The acquisition announcement went public at 10 a.m. By noon, financial news outlets were reporting it. Northstar Systems had been acquired for $38 million. My father sat in his office staring at the article. My brother called him. Dad. I know. Claire is the CEO? Yes. She sold her company for $38 million? Yes. There was a long silence. Then Daniel whispered. Is this a joke? My father looked through the glass wall of his office. Across the hallway, I was speaking with Richard and several executives. No. Daniel didn't know what to say. Then he asked. Was she actually living here because she couldn't afford to move? My father closed his eyes. No. He finally understood. She stayed because she wanted to be close to us. That afternoon, my mother called me. Claire? Yes? Can we talk? I went home. When I walked into the living room, my entire family was there. My mother looked devastated. My brother wouldn't look at me. Rachel sat beside him quietly. My father stood near the window. He turned when I entered. I owe you more than an apology. I said nothing. He continued. I was embarrassed. About what? He looked down. I thought you were failing. I nodded. And because I thought you were failing, I treated you like you were worthless. My mother started crying. Claire, we had no idea. I looked at her. You never asked. She covered her face. Then my father said something that shocked me. There's something else. I waited. He walked to the kitchen counter. There was a stack of papers there. He picked them up. These came in the mail last year. I looked at them. They were mortgage statements. My name was on the payment records. My father looked at me. You've been paying our mortgage? I nodded. He looked stunned. And the property taxes? Yes. The insurance? Yes. The electricity? Yes. He sat down. My mother stared at me. Why didn't you tell us? I smiled sadly. Because I didn't want you to feel like you owed me. My father looked at the floor. Instead, I called you a freeloader. Yes. His eyes filled with tears. I am so sorry. This time, I believed him. My father looked up. Why didn't you tell us about the company? I thought about it. Because every time I tried, you told me it wasn't real. He closed his eyes. I continued. You told me to get a real job. He nodded. I remember. You told me that people who work from home aren't serious. He looked ashamed. I was wrong. Yes. You could have told me. I shouldn't have needed to prove myself to you. He nodded slowly. That is true. Then he asked. Are you angry with me? I looked at him. I was. He swallowed. And now? I smiled. Now I'm disappointed. That hurt him more than anger would have. Because anger means you still want something from someone. Disappointment means you've stopped expecting them to change. 3 weeks later, something unexpected happened. My father was promoted. Richard called him into his office. He offered him a senior management position overseeing one of Harrington's new divisions. My father was shocked. I don't understand. Richard smiled. Claire recommended you. My father stared at him. She did? Yes. Why? Richard answered. Because she believes you still have something valuable to contribute. My father came home that evening and told me. I smiled. Congratulations. He shook his head. I don't deserve that. Maybe not. He looked surprised. I continued. But you earned it. He smiled. And for the first time in years, we hugged. Not as employer and employee. Not as CEO and father. Just as father and daughter. 6 months later, we had another family dinner. Same house. Same table. But everything felt different. My mother served dessert. Daniel was talking about his new business. Rachel was laughing. Emily was telling us about college. My father sat quietly for a moment. Then he looked at me. Claire? Yes? He smiled. I need to make a correction. Everyone laughed. He raised his glass. To my daughter. I smiled. He continued. Who I once called a freeloader. Everyone became quiet. My father looked directly at me. I was wrong. Then he said. She wasn't a freeloader. He lifted his glass. She was building something none of us could see. I felt tears forming in my eyes. My mother reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Daniel smiled. I guess we owe you an apology too. I laughed. Just buy dessert next time. Everyone laughed. My father raised his glass again. To Claire. Everyone raised theirs. And this time, when I smiled, I wasn't hiding anything. People often think success looks obvious. They imagine expensive cars, big houses, designer clothes, fancy offices. But sometimes success looks like a 29-year-old woman sitting quietly in her childhood bedroom with an old laptop. Sometimes it looks like someone who doesn't talk about their plans because they're still building them. And sometimes, the people closest to you will be the last ones to recognize what you're becoming. My father taught me something I'll never forget. Never measure someone's worth by what you can see. Because you have no idea what someone is building behind a closed door. You don't know how many nights they stayed awake. You don't know how many failures they survived. You don't know how much money they quietly paid. You don't know how many people they helped without asking for recognition. And most importantly, you don't know how close they might be to changing everything. The night my father called me a freeloader, I went upstairs feeling like I didn't matter. The next morning, his boss stood up and saluted me. But the salute wasn't what mattered. The money wasn't what mattered. The company wasn't what mattered. What mattered was finally understanding something I had spent years trying to accept. Your value doesn't decrease simply because someone fails to recognize it. Sometimes people only respect the mountain after they discover how high it is. And sometimes, the person they laughed at over dinner is the very person who will one day sit at the table and change everyone's life. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to keep building. And eventually, the truth introduced itself.